Sarah, how are you? Good morning.
I'm doing well. Good morning, Roberto.
Good. I want to start with I woke up to city and state and the attorney general getting involved in your race. Um,
That's news to me.
am I misreading it? Hold on. Am I misreading it? Let's just get our facts straight here. Bear with me. I think that is the case, but I've been wrong before. Hold on. Two. Yeah, Assembly throwing her weight behind Assemblymember Harvey Epstein.
Well, that part is not news. This is to be expected in a race like mine. A lot of the institutional folks are backing the institutional candidate. And it's something I've seen before. But look, I'm a first time candidate. I'm running, a grassroots insurgent campaign, and I'm not going to get all the names, but I am going to get all the voters.
Yeah, I just find it interesting that someone statewide would get involved in a hyper local council race. That's it. That's what in all fairness, I haven't gotten into, the sort of, but that's to your point, it's to be expected, right? Usually people that are already elected to office get the institutional support. Let's talk about what are the prime issues in the district, Sarah. I know that Beth Israel is a big thing in that area, and I know you've been very vocal about the closing of the hospital. But what do you say to the person that says, "Well, you have Bellevue not too far," or right? That's a public hospital that's not, even though Beth Israel's a private one. What are the issues there, and why is Beth Israel such an important part of the community, and why the needs can't get met at another local hospital?
The closure of Beth Israel is devastating for this community. As a native Lower East Sider, it's the hospital that all of us go to, not just in the Lower East Side and East Village, but in Gramercy, even in some parts of Kips Bay and Greenwich Village. Since the closing of St. Vincent, since the closing of Cabrini, these are the hospitals that this community has already lost. And now, to lose another has been devastating. And so the biggest challenge we're going to be facing with the closure of Beth Israel is where care for the most vulnerable, whether those are elders, whether those are folks who are low income, where that care is going to take place. The closest hospitals, as you mentioned, are Bellevue and NYU Langone is the other one. NYU Langone does not have a good track record of serving folks on Medicaid and other folks who are low income and have a limited ability to pay these high medical bills. And we know that Bellevue is great, but it has mixed results. It doesn't have the resources it needs to succeed. Bellevue thus far seems to be taking the brunt of the patients from Mount Sinai over the last year as they've been ramping down services despite our legal effort to stop them. I was part of a lawsuit to stop the closure. And so we've seen a 13% increase in the ER at Bellevue, and that was before Mount Sinai even closed. We're still waiting on the figures of the last month or so that they've been closed. So this is definitely one of the most cross-cutting issues in this district. It's certainly one that I think our state elected officials have failed to protect us from, since they are the ones that have rubber stamped this closure. And so it's critical. It's critical that whoever comes next is thinking about how we're going to bring replacement services and facilities to this community. And that is a key commitment of my campaign. I think the other most cross-cutting issue is one that I discovered when I started knocking doors almost a year ago in my community. The biggest issue, I didn't realize it until I started knocking the doors, is safety. I think there's a lot of folks who have seen a degraded quality of life across the city, especially in our district, in Lower Manhattan especially, and they want to see reaction. But as Democrats, we have failed to say that safety is a problem. We're starting to see it now with some of the candidates that we have for mayor, but it's certainly been something that's not been addressed by our party, and I think it is why we are losing elections in this moment.
So, what are your thoughts on bail overall? Do
I
you,
I
do
think
you
like
agree with the sort of the governor's posture and some of the that it needs to be tweaked, that it went too far in terms of bail reform? What do you think about the policy in general? Because a lot of people blame that as for that being the reason why we have right these low level offenses and recidivism. And what are your thoughts on that?
Look, we needed to do bail reform. We know that there were people who were rotting away in our jail system because they couldn't pay bail, not because they were guilty. And so those changes were necessary. I support them. I supported them then, and I support them now. But we know, like any good policy, there's always unintended consequences. And I think that's what we're seeing, certainly when it comes to safety across the city. There's, a number of issues that need to be reformed. I think, the discovery process needed reform. I don't think Albany has really tackled what we're hearing from all five of the district attorneys across the city, which is that they need more time to collect evidence. I don't want them to have, a no countdown clock, but I do think that that's the feedback that I've certainly heard from my DA, Alvin Bragg, and certainly what we're hearing from the other boroughs. And I think the other piece of it is the court system. We know that people are not getting the right to a fair and speedy trial in this city because we do not have enough judges to process these cases. So I'm certainly somebody who supports the efforts as of late to, increase our judges in the judicial system so that we can make sure these court cases aren't dismissed simply because there aren't judges there to preside over trials. I think it's important that everyone gets due process in this city, and that's certainly something that I'll continue to advocate for as council member with our state electeds.
So, what would you say your top three, right? You mentioned public safety, quality of life is sort of intertwined. You mentioned healthcare. What are some of the other things that that you see as when you're hearing and when you're knocking and when you're talking to constituents? What are some of their other concerns?
After safety, the biggest issue that we hear about in this community and certainly across New York City is the affordability crisis, which is primarily driven by the housing crisis. Folks don't have access to an affordable home. And I don't mean affordable in the way that we talk about it in politics. I mean just a home that they can afford. And that is at every income level, from the lowest income to middle income to even folks who are higher income. And we're losing people from New York City because we don't have the ability to provide housing that is affordable to individuals and to families in the long term. I'm talking to older folks whose children have moved out of our community because they cannot afford to live in the community that raised them. And that shouldn't be the case. We want to be able to keep people here. We want people to be able to raise families here. We want people to be able to live here and not spend half of their income on rent. So housing is a key issue. I've been a supporter of building more housing. I think every neighborhood needs to contribute a little bit to the housing crisis. And I'm excited to see some of the changes the city has made to support that. But we know that we're on a path to create 80,000 homes in the next 10 years, and we need 500,000 homes. And so that's going to be a critical focus for me as council member. As you know, the council has a huge role to play in every rezoning and land use decisions that happen across the city.
You have an interesting district, and I want to just stay on the housing thing because you have the district you're running in has also a heavy NYCHA footprint. How do you navigate that world? Like again, because NYCHA is affordable housing. It's probably one of the largest. Mitchell Lama and NYCHA. Well, it's how a lot of people have stayed in that part of town in neighborhoods like the Lower East Side and south of 14th Street. That's the reason they're still there, is because of NYCHA. So how do you straddle the two worlds?
It's so critical that we prioritize NYCHA. Every elected official will tell you that, but I've actually spent my career working on NYCHA issues. I started working with NYCHA when I was at City Hall, just after the federal government sued the city for the conditions that residents have been experiencing for decades due to disinvestment, to neglect, and honestly, apathy on the part of most of our politicians. I'll say something about my experience beyond professional experience. I'm a renter. I'm the only renter in my race. Everyone else in my race owns their home. And what that means is that my race is not that much different from most other races. Most politicians, come from very privileged backgrounds who have the ability to own a home, to pay market rate. I'm a rent stabilized tenant. And so when I talk to other NYCHA residents, because 1 in 11 renters in New York City is a NYCHA resident. 1 in every 15 residents of New York City is a NYCHA resident. It's critical that we make sure that these folks are protected. You don't have as many long-term protections when you don't own your home, and that shouldn't be the case. It's why I've done work in my career to actually enshrine the residents' rights, public housing resident rights, into the state law that created the Public Housing Trust, which is one of the vehicles we have for renovating NYCHA. But I think what's most critical in my community is that folks understand what are the options available to them, especially as we see what's happening in Washington. We cannot sit and wait idly by. We have to make sure that folks know there are opportunities still on the table to fully renovate their homes, because that housing, it's affordable today, but it won't be here tomorrow if we don't act. And so that's, a critical piece of my campaign. I got into this race in part because I saw so many of my elected officials refuse to provide information to the residents about what Section 8 programs could do to help renovate their homes. And I thought, as somebody who's been working alongside residents can make their choices, but they need to make informed choices. And that means that true self-determination is going to come from them knowing all the options on the table.
Sarah, what draw the distinction, right? And I also want to sort of talk a little bit about your background, where you, if you're from originally Lower Manhattan, where are you from originally? And again, draw the distinction between you and the ones I'm familiar with is Andrea Gordillo, former Congress member Anthony Weiner, and Assembly member Harvey Epstein. Talk a little bit about how your background qualifies you to one, serve in the city council, and two, draw the distinction for the average voter. Like, why should I vote for Sarah Batchu when Harvey's my assembly member, or Harvey, was a very, very involved as a parent advocate, housing advocate. I mean, I'm just, again, former Congress member, for better or worse, was elected to the council once upon a time. And despite whatever his shortcomings are, and I don't want to get into that because that's what this is not what this conversation is about. Why, why, why you and not the other woman in the race, right? Andrea, the Latina woman in the race, conceivably. Please draw that distinction and talk a little bit about your background too, and what you bring, because our experiences do bring different perspectives and different things to our work.
I came from a family that has a very New York story. We were from Chicago, but the story is New York in that, my mom is Jewish, my dad is an immigrant from India. We're a mix of a little bit of everything. My husband is Venezuelan. We have a very multicultural background that I think reflects a lot of what New York City is. My parents are physicians, and, I didn't choose to go to medical school. My dad always reminds me it's never too late. But I chose to go into public service because I inherited something pretty important from my parents, which is the stubborn belief that we have to look out for one another, especially when times are tough. And these are the toughest of times, not just in New York City, but obviously in our country. And so when I look at my race and I see there are folks who are backed by lobbyists, there are folks who are backed by powerful interests. You mentioned the Attorney General at the beginning of this conversation. These are the folks that we expect to back the establishment. My campaign is not that. I have been leading and fundraising the entirety of this race. In every single filing, I have been the top fundraiser in this race. And that is because I have a wave of grassroots support. When I left City Hall, I started a community center in my district on Avenue D from the ground up with my neighbors and with my colleagues with very little government support. In fact, every government grant we had, we could not use because the requirements were so onerous. And so it really came down to really the sweat equity that the Lower East Side is really, really familiar with, and amazing folks really came together to bring that space together. Because of that work, I have really deep ties in this community. I might not have been here 20, 25 years, but I've been here long enough for people to know my track record and what I'm able to do for the community. It's why when I first filed my campaign, I actually had the lowest average contribution size in the entire city of all council candidates, and certainly had many folks from the work that I've done, folks who live in NYCHA, folks who don't have a lot to give, able to give $10 here and there, and I've been really blessed to have their support. What differentiates me from the other candidates in this race is I've lived in every corner of this district over the last 10 years, almost 10 years that I've been in this district. I didn't choose that, but because of the affordability crisis and the housing crisis, I've had to move around a lot, but it's given me the privilege to know what life looks like on Bleecker Street in Greenwich Village, which is the newest part of the district. It's given me the privilege of knowing what COVID was like in Kips Bay. I'm grateful for the deep ties that I've built in the Lower East Side and East Village, but it's so critical that we have folks who understand the very real challenges that our district is dealing with. There are so many folks who are rent stabilized and who live in fear when they see increases like 7.75% on a 2-year lease, and they think, can I continue to afford this rent? Can I continue to be in this home that I've had sometimes 40, 50 years? And so I know what that's like. I organize rent stabilized tenants in the work that I do now. And I'm ready to fight for those folks. I'm ready to fight to keep people in New York, and that whether they're afraid to be leaving their house right now and that's why they want to leave New York, or they are being pushed out because of the cost, we need to address every facet of what people are experiencing, every challenge that is making them think that New York does not care about me right now. My government, my leaders do not care about me. That cannot be the case, and we have to fight that.
Sarah, best day on the trail so far.
Every day. I love knocking doors. I think you meet a lot of candidates who say they want to run for office and then they don't want to actually do the voter outreach.
How
I
many
am
doors have you
someone,
knocked on?
oh, Roberto, I'm not going to tell you now, but I'll say thousands and thousands of doors. And you can imagine I've been knocking for a year in my community. So we certainly have hit a lot of doors and have done many passes of the same voters. But look, the thing that I've learned in this race is that you have to push yourself to do things that you've never done. You're running for office, whether you're an extrovert or you're an introvert, you got to push yourself to the edge. I certainly have been pleasantly surprised by how much the actual work of just talking to folks actually renews me and gives me so much energy to be able to push forward with the agenda that we have, certainly, but just with fighting, because I cannot sit down. None of us should be sitting down on the couch right now. And it's certainly why we elect, representatives to do the strongest fighting for us, because we can't all be fighting Trump. We can't all be fighting, the mayor every day. But I myself just was tired of sitting on the sidelines. And certainly that's why I got up and just started knocking doors and hearing from my community what the issues were. And it's how I knew that we were not going to win that general election, a year ago, because I saw how little my party was giving to voters in New York City, one of the most progressive places in the country, and people were frustrated, feeling like they were not heard and that their government did not care about them. And so that is why I've launched this campaign and rooted it in care, because it's something that everyone should feel in their community, in their homes, and in their wonderful city.
Worst day.
The worst day. The beginning was hard. When you first launch a campaign, most people don't know your name. You have a tight circle of supporters, and as a first-time candidate, you can't count on all the elected officials and labor organizations getting in behind your campaign. The first 6 months of my race were solely focused on fundraising and building infrastructure, and you have to convince every single person that's helping you at that time to do it for free, and so that was tough. It was very lonely in the beginning to really build that coalition, but slowly, one person came by that had been on a campaign previously in our neighborhood, and then I, met another person through colleagues, and slowly these people started to form a team. And when it became a team, it became real. It became more than a dream, more than a vision. It became more than a personal project. It became a community project, and I'm excited that we don't have as many of those slow and quiet and difficult days that we had in the beginning, because that's what it's going to take to win this race.
Sarah, last point. Just this is just the sort of what are your thoughts to someone that says, "Hey, Sarah, you know what? It looks like it's inevitable. Harvey's going to win. He's got all the support again. I'm just saying hypothetically. because I've seen Stranger Things, right? And or
Mhm.
I've seen people polling and things that were way off, where people said someone couldn't, and guess what? We all got egg on our face, or So I
Mhm.
think everyone should do what they want to do in life, and if they believe they're the best person, they should run. But thoughts on saying, "Hey, I'm gonna step aside. I'm gonna make a deal and endorse Harvey, and then run for the assembly." Essentially, because you're a first-time candidate. One, has the question been posed? And two, what do you say to someone that says that? Because you want to serve.
I chose to serve at the city level. My entire career has been at the city level. I think I have unique skills. I've negotiated the budget and been part of the budgeting process from city hall, from city council as an advocate. I've been a part of the legislative process in city council and city hall, all the main functions of what makes an effective city council member. I've done it from multiple vantage points. I am best positioned to be here. And I'll tell you, our assembly member is best positioned to be in Albany. He has been a wonderful advocate. He is a housing and tenant rights expert. That is where most of those decisions get made in Albany. And so we can't lose him. And of course, there are people who tell me that I should be running for his seat. But look, like if he wins this council race, we know it's an insider process. It's not the people choosing who that replacement will be. It is the Democratic Party choosing who that person will be. And because I'm an insurgent candidate, because I'm a first time candidate, because I'm a woman of color, that is not the space that I am prepared to win. But I am prepared to win in my district where we know 60% of the likely electorate is women. And it's no secret why women have been able to win in this council district year after year, even after the redistricting recently. This is a women's seat. So it is important that we keep that leadership in our community. And it's important that we have the next generation of leaders. That is the biggest problem we have as Democrats, is that we don't build the bench. And certainly in New York City, it is one of our biggest weaknesses that we have elected officials constantly choose to leave their seats in Albany and go to the city council, or to leave City Hall and go to Albany. We can't have musical chairs. We have to start fighting. And if we're focused on what seat we're doing it from, then we are not ready to address the moment that is coming before us now.
Sarah, thank you for the time, and you have run a very good campaign from the outside looking in. So I want to commend you for that. And on a personal note, thank you for your fight on behalf of Beth Israel. I was actually born in the hospital.
Oh
Um,
my God.
yeah, my first cousin was employed, or maybe I have to see if she still works there, but. So I have a connection to the hospital, and so thank you for championing that cause. And it's definitely something that you should be commended for taking that on. So, and for advocating for the community on that. So thank you for that.
Of course, and thank you for sharing that. You're one of many in this community who relied on that hospital. So it's so important that we continue the fight.
All right, Tara. Thank you so much, and I'm going to let you go on because I know you have a campaign to run. But thank you, and we'll be in touch, and all the best. Talk soon.
Thank you so much.